I'm a bit excited today. I've got my hands on the 7Artisans 60mm f2.8 macro lens. It's super duper new out, like I don't even think it's available to buy yet, so I'm very privileged to have a first look and a bit of a review of this lens. The obvious comparison in Micro Four Thirds land is the 60mm Olympus f2.8. I do have that lens as well, and I shall do some side-by-side comparisons in a little bit, but first of all, let's just look at the 7Artisans lens. It is built like an actual tank. It's pretty big and pretty heavy with very solid metal build quality. And internal focusing, it ain't. Yes, I'm a child. So if you're looking for a more portable macro lens, this may not be the option for you. But outside of that, I'm really struggling to find some flaws, guys, to be honest. The results in the photographs are super duper sharp. Super sharp. Even if you sort of get a stupidly narrow depth of field at 2.8, and you've got your aperture all the way up to f16 on this macro lens. One thing in particular that I absolutely adored with this lens is how massive and gorgeous the bokeh turns out. I absolutely love the look of that. I'd love to try this maybe for portraiture as well, because that sort of bokeh on such a small sensor is awesome. But of course on Micro Four Thirds it is the equivalent of 120mm, so it's great for portraiture in terms of how it will look, but a little bit hard to wrangle. You'll have to stand quite far away from your subject. So as you can see, side by side with the Olympus 60mm, which I think is the one to beat, there's very little difference. I've tried to match the photographs as well as I can, but because the subjects are so small, it was quite hard to exactly replicate it. But I hope this gives you sort of an unbiased side-by-side comparison. The images here are just very lightly edited, just slightly contrasted, slightly just getting the exposure correct. Nothing fancy, because I wanted to leave it sort of as true to life as possible to show you what it can do. On this set of images with the dice, there is sort of distortion around the edge of the dice, but the same thing happened on the Olympus lens, and I just think it was a very tricky scene to sort of get right. I think any lens would struggle with it. But aside from on that image, there is very little chromatic aberration that I've found. On the edges, you know, it seems very clean. So the big reason that the 7Artisans lens will be cheaper than the Olympus one is because it is manual focus. Now, personally, for macro photography, automatic focus drives me up the wall. With the fly-by-wire focusing system of the Olympus, you find yourself turning the focus ring for absolutely ages to get it to move, because it's that system where the faster you turn it, the quicker it'll move. So it's quite hard to quickly get focus with the Olympus. With the 7Artisans, because it is sort of a proper manual lens with hard stops at either end, you can find your focus much more quickly. Of course, for more simple shots and portraiture, the autofocus on the Olympus is a fantastic feature. So if you really do want autofocus for those moments where you're not going to be dialing it in, the Olympus is great. If you feel like you can live without the autofocus, I really do think the 7Artisans equivalent is well worth a consideration. I'm absolutely blown away by how similar the results are when comparing it to sort of a very premium Olympus Micro Four Thirds lens. Of course there are the benefits, you know, your autofocus, the Olympus is smaller, it's definitely internal focusing. You could stick it in your bag and use it as and when, whereas with the 7Artisans, because it is a little bit bigger and heavier, you really need to go out with the purpose of shooting with it, I think, because it is quite hefty. But when you consider that most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time, when you're shooting macro photography, you're going to want to be using it in manual focus anyway, I think it's blooming impressive. So this one, the 60mm 7Artisans, is very user-friendly, 1:1 ratio for your macro, so you can get super duper close, but it's not hard to use in any way, shape or form. If you've never done macro photography before, you could buy this and get amazing shots straight away. There is a thread on both the smaller part and the larger part of the 7Artisans lens. So if you wanted to attach filters or a flash ring, a ring flash, you can do. that's no problem. I know that's something that a lot of people will be interested to know, because it will help with macro photography. You need as much light as possible. With these sample shots, I was using my 2-panel lights, my RGB light, and also a battery powered light. So there is so much light going in because you want to illuminate the subject and use as fast a shutter speed as possible, and sort of stop down your aperture a bit as well, because the depth of field can be ridiculous if you sort of leave it wide open at 2.8. And also, quick macro tip, get a spray bottle and just spray whatever it is you're shooting, as long as it's not electrical. Because the drops of water just add an extra depth and something to sort of have the light bounce off, and I just think it's a really good way to add an extra level to your macro photography. So I hope this answers some of your questions. I hope you like the sample shots. If you have any questions about the lens, do let me know, and I'll do my best to answer it in the comments. Just to sort of let you know, as it stands, this is so new. I didn't get it in a box, I didn't get it with a lens cap, I don't have sort of the specification sheet myself, so it is very sort of new to me and to the world. But hopefully in the coming weeks we'll learn more about it, and I'm very excited to see what everyone comes up with this lens.